On the morning of December 7, 1941, the battleship USS Arizona was sitting quietly in Pearl Harbor. Her engines were cold. Her crew was relaxed. Most believed the war was still far away. Then, without warning, the sky exploded. Japanese aircraft descended over the harbor, dropping bombs and torpedoes into a fleet that wasn't ready to fight. Anti-aircraft guns struggled to respond as fire and smoke filled the air. Arizona was hit early. A single armor-piercing bomb struck near her forward turrets, punching straight through the deck and into the ship's ammunition magazines. Seconds later, the battleship detonated from the inside. The explosion was so violent it lifted the ship out of the water. Flames shot hundreds of feet into the air. The forward section vanished in a blinding fireball. More than 1,100 men were killed almost instantly. The USS Arizona sank where she was moored. Never firing a shot, never leaving the harbor, never given a chance to fight back. As the smoke cleared, the wreck burned for days. And beneath the surface, something remained. A battleship entombed in shallow water. Still holding her crew. Still leaking oil. The war had begun. And the USS Arizona would never leave Pearl Harbor again. The attack on Pearl Harbor unfolded in minutes. Japanese aircraft swept low over the harbor, striking ships that were still moored, engines cold, crews unprepared. Torpedoes slammed into battleships along Battleship Row as bombs fell from high altitude. USS Arizona was not the primary target. She sat exposed, her deck crowded with crewmen responding to alarms, many still unsure what was happening. Anti-aircraft guns fired desperately as planes roared overhead. At 8:06 a.m., a single Japanese bomber released an armor-piercing bomb. It punched straight through Arizona's deck. The bomb penetrated deep into the ship, passing through multiple levels before reaching the forward ammunition magazines, a space packed with explosives, powder, and shells. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the magazines detonated. The explosion tore through the battleship from the inside out. The forward section was obliterated instantly. Steel plating was ripped apart as fire and pressure surged upward in a massive fireball. Witnesses on nearby ships described a blast so violent it felt like the harbor itself had erupted. Arizona broke apart where she sat. Men stationed near the forward turrets were killed instantly. Others were trapped below decks as compartments collapsed and fires raged above them. In less than 10 seconds, the battleship was effectively destroyed. And the water rushed in. When the fire finally began to fade, the USS Arizona was already gone. She hadn't drifted. She hadn't capsized. She sank straight down, settling into the mud of Pearl Harbor where she had been moored just hours earlier. The forward half of the ship was destroyed beyond recognition. The explosion had collapsed decks, twisted steel, and sealed hundreds of men inside in seconds. The water rushed in so fast that many never had a chance to escape. Below the surface, the wreck burned. Fuel ignited, flames trapped underwater, feeding on oil and ammunition as the ship settled deeper into the harbor floor. For days, smoke and heat continued to rise from the sunken battleship. Inside the hull, darkness took over. Compartments flooded. Passageways collapsed. And those trapped below were entombed where they stood, in engine rooms, gun turrets, and sleeping quarters that would never be opened again. Unlike other ships damaged at Pearl Harbor, Arizona was never refloated. The destruction was too complete. The loss too great. Salvage crews stripped what they could from the wreck. Guns, equipment, usable metal, but the hull itself was left untouched. The USS Arizona was declared a permanent war grave. And as the harbor returned to life above her, the battleship remained below, silent, broken, and holding the majority of her crew inside. When USS Arizona settled into the harbor floor, the battle above continued. But for hundreds of men inside the ship, the war had already ended. The explosion had sealed off entire compartments in seconds. Steel bulkheads collapsed. Passageways vanished. Fires consumed the forward sections as water rushed in faster than anyone could escape. Some sailors survived the blast, only to be trapped below decks in total darkness. They were never reached. Rescue crews worked desperately on nearby ships, pulling survivors from burning wrecks and oil-covered water. But Arizona's destruction was too complete. The heat was too intense. The hull too unstable. No attempt was made to recover the men inside. Instead, the decision was made to leave them where they lay. More than 900 sailors remain entombed within the wreck today, sealed inside steel that has not been opened since 1941. As weeks passed, the wreck was stripped of anything usable. Guns were removed. Equipment salvaged. But the hull itself was left untouched. Arizona was no longer considered a ship. She was declared a permanent war grave. Above the wreck, the harbor returned to life. New ships arrived. The war moved forward. But beneath the water, time stopped. The battleship remained exactly where she fell, holding the men who never had a chance to leave. And as the years passed, something else began to rise from the wreck. In the years after Pearl Harbor, something strange was noticed above the wreck of USS Arizona. Dark drops began to appear on the water's surface. Oil. At first, it was dismissed as residue from the attack. But the years passed, and the oil never stopped. Even today, more than 80 years later, the battleship continues to leak fuel from deep within her hull. Small rainbow-colored slicks rise slowly to the surface of Pearl Harbor, a phenomenon many have come to call Arizona's tears. The oil comes from tanks sealed inside the wreck, still holding thousands of gallons of fuel trapped since 1941. Engineers estimate the ship could continue leaking for decades to come. It is a quiet reminder. The ship is not dead steel. She is still there. Still changing. Still holding the past inside her. For visitors standing above the wreck, the sight is unsettling. Beneath the memorial platform, the outline of the battleship is clearly visible, her turrets, her shattered superstructure, her broken bow. And below that, the men who never escaped. The USS Arizona is not just a historical site. She is a living war grave. One that continues to surface, drop by drop, long after the guns fell silent. USS Arizona was never raised. She was never repaired. She was never allowed to fade quietly into history. Instead, she became something else. Above her wreck, a memorial was built, not to celebrate victory, but to mark loss. Visitors stand suspended over the sunken battleship, looking down through clear water at the outline of a ship frozen in the moment the war began. Beneath them, the hull remains exactly where it fell. The forward magazines, where the explosion occurred, are gone, erased in seconds. The rest of the ship lies intact, settled into the harbor floor, still holding the men who never escaped. More than 900 sailors remain inside the wreck today. They were never recovered. They were never moved. The USS Arizona is not abandoned. She is guarded by time, water, and memory. Every drop of oil that rises from her hull is a reminder that the past is not finished. That the war did not simply end, it left scars that still surface decades later. Arizona never sailed into battle. She never fired her guns. But she became the moment the world changed. And while other wrecks lie forgotten in the deep, Arizona rests where millions can see her, a ship that still speaks, still bleeds, and still remembers the men inside her. This is Deep Sea Warzone, where some ships sink into darkness, and others remain, forever awake.